Do you feel borders limit your potential? Become a citizen of the world and achieve the unimaginable. Expand your business and secure your family's future with the St. Kitts and Nevis Platinum Standard Citizenship by Investment Program. Unlock a world of possibilities. St. Kitts and Nevis, the cradle of citizenship by investment since 1984.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Business Day Dialogues live in partnership with CS Global Partners. Today, we're putting the focus on why South Africans look to offshore investments to diversify wealth in uncertain times, and how much of a diversification opportunity citizenship by investment puts on the table when considering an investment strategy. To our viewers, do bear in mind that while this is a pre-recorded session, you are still welcome to send your questions through in the live chat, and a representative from CS Global Partners will be available on that live chat to respond to your questions on behalf of our panel members today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in unpredictable times, diversifying investments so that it limits one's exposure to risk becomes a key priority. And as investors consider their options in diversifying their wealth, the offshore parameters are widening. In fact, geographically diversifying domicile options with investment migration is becoming more and more of a feature in diversified portfolios, and this to overcome the limitations of being restricted to one jurisdiction. Over the next hour, we put the spotlight on this developing trend and take a closer look at some of the options the St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment Program offers investors, and South African investors in particular. So, is dual citizenship an essential feature of a diversified investor profile in 2021? Joining me for the conversation today, Les Khan, Chief Executive Officer of the St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship Investment Unit. Now, Les has over 20 years of experience with large financial organizations and risk management companies globally. But since 2015, he's been intimately involved in the revamping of the Citizenship by Investment Unit in St. Kitts and Nevis and has become a resident expert on citizenship programs within the Caribbean. He's brought valuable experience to corporate and financial clients as well as governments globally, leading initiatives to automate today's citizenship by investment programs. Also with us today, Micah Emmett, who's CEO of CS Global Partners, a world-leading legal advisory that specializes in intelligent citizenship solutions. Micah is a dual qualified attorney in South Africa and the United Kingdom with years of practice in the fields of citizenship, residence, immigration, and foreign investment law. She's provided consultancy services to both governments and private firms, and in her role as a government advisor, Micah has spearheaded many of the recent developments in the field of citizenship by investment. And then finally, Martin Ackerman, who's advisory partner and chief economist at Citadel. Martin is part of the advisory and asset management teams at Citadel and is responsible for global and local economic strategy and global portfolio construction. He manages the Citadel range of global objective matching portfolios and is an advisor to a number of Citadel's ultra high net worth clients. So that's who will be on our panel today. Thank you all for joining the conversation. And Martin, let's kick things off with you right at the top. Spell it out for us. Why is it important for South Africans to diversify wealth, particularly offshore?
Yes, I think, if you look at the South African economy, we're only 0.7% of the global economy. So it is one thing to create your wealth here. It is another thing to protect your wealth only in South Africa. We're all global citizens. As we speak, most of the things that we buy, it's in hard currency. And therefore, it's important to make sure that you have a portfolio that can protect your purchasing power in a hard currency. So let's say in US dollars. And the only way to achieve that is to make sure that you externalize a lot of your wealth offshore into various different global markets and make sure that, that investment can grow in advance of dollar inflation or making sure that you can still purchase in a hard currency. So that's important. It's not really about the country-specific risk, about the concern about the future of a specific country. it is really about making sure that you get exposure to the global landscape. Again, if you think about SA, SA economy and market is very concentrated. The JSE, as an example, is very specific sectors.
And Micah, indications are that wealthy investors are always actively seeking access to alternative options should the need arise. To what extent have you seen demand for second residency and citizenship programs rise as a backup plan, as a plan B?
Well, as Martin has correctly pointed out, this idea of sort of being a global citizen has become forefront and center. And I think what second citizenship provides is almost priceless in your kind of asset basket, because it's not only about the diversity, but it's about access to new markets, and then most importantly, the quality of life and the safety and security that it can provide. And we've seen with this pandemic, not just in South Africa, but across the world globally, we have seen how people have been affected by decisions that governments have made. So as individuals and as smart and astute investors, I think people around the world are realizing in order to have that access, one of the best assets on the list is to get an alternative citizenship.
So in that context, Les, tell us a bit more about the St. Kitts and Nevis program in particular and why it's relevant to South African investors relative to the numerous other countries that already boast, investment programs of their own.
Well, Alicia, first of all, I have to say that St. Kitts and Nevis is the origin of all citizenship by investment programs. Back in 1984, the program started, and every other program around the world has emanated from what we have here. It was in foresight for this country to predict that they will be able to generate foreign direct investment, but as a result of generating foreign direct investment, give the opportunity to individuals to have a second passport to provide mobility, stability, security. St. Kitts and Nevis, as I said, is the first program in the world. Our culture is similar to that of South Africa. We both belong to the Commonwealth group of nations, and our legal systems are very similar. We are tied to the English environment, and as a result, we believe that this commonality between our two countries gives South African citizens a real opportunity to be at home with a citizenship that is familiar to them.
Yeah, it's the blueprint, right? We've established that, Micah, but there are several active golden visa programs that an investor can choose from, and that's the reality. Some offer citizenship, others offer the residence option as well. What's the difference between a citizenship by investment program versus a resident by investment program?
So let's first define the difference between citizenship and residence. I mean, citizenship is a relationship developed between the government and an individual. So it refers to the individual's allegiance to a government in exchange for the protection at home and abroad. Whereas a resident is usually someone who is legally living in a country to work or for any other particular reason. And with a citizenship, you have a lot more rights and protection. Whereas with a residence visa can be cancelled at any time. So it's quite important to distinguish between the two because they use golden visa quite loosely to cover the investor immigration industry. But they're two distinct products, actually, because once you've got a citizenship, and in the case of citizenship by investment, it's quite an easy, straightforward, quick path. A residence doesn't always mean that you will achieve citizenship of it. So I think that's quite important for the audience to understand the differentiation because residence isn't always guaranteed in the long term.
So with that distinction then made for us, Les, let's drill into some of the detail when it comes to the kind of investment options under the St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment Program in particular. And I guess perhaps the best place to start here is by looking at the most direct investment path one could take if you're going down this route via the Sustainable Growth Fund. What exactly are we looking at there?
Well, absolutely. The most direct path is the Sustainable Growth Fund. But the two traditional methods of citizenship investment through citizenship are both a fund, which is the Sustainable Growth Fund, and the other is the real estate option. In the Sustainable Growth Fund, there's a minimum price for an individual of 150,000 US dollars to get citizenship. Fortunately for many people, at this point in time, we have a limited time offer, which allows us to include a family of up to 4 individuals for 150,000. So this is a reduction of about $45,000 in total. As I said before, and Micah confirmed, I mean, the SGF or Sustainable Growth Fund is the most direct route. It's the simplest route. There's no documentation in terms of purchase and sale agreements, escrow agreements, etc. In the second option, we have the real estate feature. And the real estate feature is broken out into 2 sections. One is if you're investing in an approved project within the country at $400,000. Now, the holding period for this investment has to be 5 years. The next part of the real estate is a $200,000 option, which is basically a share or a fraction of a unit. And the holding period for this is about 7 years. It is actually 7 years. So these two are the traditional routes of investment. But as St. Kitts and Nevis is known for its innovation, we've come up with alternative investment strategies. Another one will be that for privately owned homes. So if someone is looking for a villa outside of a development, outside of a hotel, for the next 2 years, we will have the ability to have them invest in private homes with a minimum value of 400,000. And we've just created something that's called an alternative investment option that we are developing as we go along. And this is to allow for the funding of state-owned initiatives like hospitals and bridges, et cetera, et cetera. So these are opportunities that we are developing, and we expect that our program will continue to be the leader in innovativeness and in all CBIs at this point in time.
So Les, if you've got the capital then, is anybody eligible? Or what kind of due diligence process are we looking at here?
Well, everyone is eligible if they are over the age of 18 as a main applicant, and they can bring their spouse or dependent children. It's very important that, and I appreciate the fact that you mentioned due diligence, because St. Kitts and Nevis has one of the strongest due diligence processes in all of the CBI programs. Our due diligence starts with when a client goes to an agent or goes to someone like CS Global and says, I want citizenship. The first event that occurs is a due diligence check on the individual. Once the agent is comfortable with the individual in terms of their due diligence, then they can submit a file to what we call a local service provider. The local service provider is the only person who is authorized to send an application to the unit. Now, that local service provider, which is who is regulated by our financial group, is able and has to submit a due diligence report in addition to the unit. Once the unit gets that due diligence report and that application file, there are 2 ways that, or 2 avenues that we conduct due diligence. One, we send it we send the application details to a due diligence company, international due diligence company, who is able to do a check on the individual through open source, through any media, through anything that is accessible. In addition, that due diligence company is able to put boots on the ground wherever that person has lived for more than 2 years, and they will do background checks, confirmation of employment, confirmation of marriage, birth certificate verification, translations, proof of translations, whether the documents are properly notarized, and so forth. So that's one avenue. The second avenue that we will conduct from the unit itself is we send the data to what we call international law enforcement. And our international law partners then take this data and access the various databases that they may have through Interpol, through sanction lists, through databases that may cover criminal activity, may cover anti-money laundering. So all of this information is then gathered by the unit, and an assessment is done through an experienced group of people who go through different layers of what we call vetting or review of the file. And that is what makes our program so robust.
Martin, I'm going to bring you into the conversation in just a bit. Before I do, Micah, of course, all of those checks and balances are very much warranted if you're looking at a process like this. I mean, it's almost expected. At the end of the day, how popular has this avenue been for South Africans? Have they been exploring it, and how easy has it been to apply for citizenship via this route?
So, Alicia, I've been in this industry for a very long time, and when I first entered the investor immigration industry, there were only really 2 programs available, and St. Kitts and Nevis was, I think, the main one that people looked at. However, it was quite unknown back in the day. However, I think that perception's changed a lot, and it is now the most popular, most known citizenship investment in the world. And I think partly, besides the fact that it's got such an excellent reputation, it's the process. It's simple and easy. Yes, you have to jump through the religions, but if you've got a clean record, then that's not an issue at all. I mean, it takes 3 months from time of submitting the application to actually achieve citizenship and granted the citizenship. And St. Kitts and Nevis have a special accelerated processing option where you can obtain citizenship within, I think it's 60 days. Les can correct me on that, which is so seamless for investors who are particularly time poor. So it's great.
Absolutely. Well, with that foundation laid, we're roughly halfway through the conversation at this point. Just a quick reminder to our viewers, if you're finding this webinar helpful, you can post your comments below, or if you'd like any questions answered, please post them in the live chat as well. Martin, let's bring things back to you now. I mean, hearing about the St. Kitts and Nevis opportunity, how would you categorize this type of investment? Does this correlate with the trends that you're seeing amongst South African investors investing offshore over the recent past?
Yeah, I think, if we go back 20, 25 years, we had very, very tight exchange regulations still in South Africa. So at that point in time, for whatever reason, families wanted to leave the country. The only way to actually diversify your physical wealth was to actually immigrate and pick a country, anywhere in the world, and then you can actually take your money out. These days, exchange regulations being lifted. There's still a 10 million per person per year. If you think about that, family of 4, that's 40 million a year that you can actually externalize without any issue. So the environment changed quite a lot. So if we look at the trend recently, over the past couple of years, a lot of families started using almost this passport to actually get your wealth anywhere in the world, and started externalizing a big part of their wealth, if not all of their wealth, into tax-friendly havens. But by doing that, you don't necessarily get a residency.
Because at the end of the day, we do know how dangerous it can be when investment decisions are guided or misguided, I should say, by fear as opposed to clearly outlined objectives. Micah, we've been talking about this evolution, right, of what was considered perhaps a nice to have alternative residence and citizenship now being a must have essential asset in any diversification strategy. How much security does an investment migration program actually provide? How does holding a suite of domiciles hedge one's risk?
Well, let's look at the pandemic. I think it's a perfect example to show how important it is to have diversified residences. A lot of people were stuck in their country of origin and weren't able to move. So I think it's almost critical. I mean, if you look at how fast the world is moving, we as global citizens, and I think global citizens can be classed as anyone who's got a certain amount of wealth, who has a certain amount of responsibility to the globe, who has international businesses. It's actually quite irresponsible, both in terms of their sort of wealth diversification, their family future, to not look at having an alternative citizenship. And sometimes I have conversations, with friends and family who only have one citizenship, regardless of which country they're living in. And I think people forget how quickly life can change and can be affected. And it's not just in South Africa, and it's not just the unrest. I think with the pandemic, we've seen how governments have made such strict decisions that have affected, our freedom. And at the end of the day, having 2, 3, multiple residences or citizenships can certainly give you the freedom that you need for you and your family. So I think, it's critical.
Yeah. But Les, in essence, we are pointing here to an increased appetite triggered as far as, investor interest in these programs are concerned. So when it comes to developments in the field of citizenship by investment, what are we looking at? You've been intimately involved in revamping the citizenship by investment unit in St. Kitts and Nevis. So how has it evolved?
Well, over the years, the 2 options that were available to individuals, as I mentioned before, were the fund and the real estate. The evolution of the program has gone to the point of ensuring that proper due diligence is done for all applicants. We have to make sure that we continue to be the platinum brand. And in so doing, the platinum brand is about ensuring that we get individuals who are not of ill repute and that we do the relevant due diligence. But in addition to that, it's about allowing and doing process that allows the client to get his citizenship within the most efficient timeline. And this is one of the areas that St. Kitts and Nevis has excelled in. We are the only country that offers what we call an accelerated application process. And this allows the client to pay an additional fee and have his application accelerated through due diligence, through the process in the department. And while our normal process may be about 90 days, with an accelerated application process, we are able to go through the whole file and approval within 45 to 60 days. This allows individuals who are keen on getting their citizenship very quickly to be able to travel, to provide that security, and to be able to take that vacation that they didn't have for such a long time. St. Kitts and Nevis also has many hotels, and again, with the Platinum brand, we were the only island that had 5 branded hotels as part of its portfolio, and continues to be so. So with these innovativeness, with these options that we grant to the clients, we continue to be that Platinum brand.
Yeah. Do you find that it's generally pretty smooth sailing for South African applicants, Les? What are some of the challenges or the biggest hurdles that need to be cleared going down this path?
With any application, we must ensure that the proper documentation is received. So the birth certificate, the marriage certificate, it must be clearly notarized. We must have bank statements that show us the source of funds or the proof of funds. So these are some of the key requirements of any application. For South Africa, again, due diligence is going to be the key, and we continue to do that. I have not seen any reason why a South African applicant will take more time than any of our standard processes.
Yeah.
So we offer the option for the accelerated application to South Africans too. But we ensure that all of the applications are processed within the most timely and efficient manner.
Micah, detractors have argued that these programs favor the rich, but beyond that, there are concerns about money laundering, criminal activity, backdoor access to countries that, circumvent normal immigration systems. Is this a system that's ripe for fraud?
That's a great question. And there are a couple of ways to answer that. Firstly, I think Les has rightly sort of indicated and pointed out what the process is for due diligence. And these citizenship by investment programs has the strictest due diligence of any immigration process out there in the world, be it normal route of immigration, normal route to citizenship. So from that point of view, very strict anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism checks and balances are put in place. So I feel quite confident on that note. I think the other point to sort of just focus on is if you look at the investment required for St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship for a family of 4, we're talking just over 2 million rand for a family. Now, if you think you can't really buy a house in South Africa for less than that, so it's not an exorbitant investment to make. So generally, I think one needs to sort of be reasonable about understanding where citizenship by investment fits. And lastly, when you look at the larger immigration picture, when you compare the number of people coming into countries versus the number of under normal immigration systems versus people coming under the citizenship or the residence by investment schemes, you'll note that it's probably less than 1% of the total movement of people across.
Yeah. Martin, I've just got to ask you, regulatory parameters, are there any concerns that we're going to see governments become a little more strict with that? I mean, we've seen even countries that once jealously guarded their citizenship now U-turning, and one wonders the extent to which, tighter regulation does become imperative for governments across the board, and how that potentially impacts future growth of business down this avenue.
Yeah, I think we're in an environment where, after the financial crisis in 2008, the biggest demand for some of the investment banks like Merrill Lynch were actually compliance officers. So they, as a result of the increase in terms of compliance, everything that we spoke about now, the boxes that we need to tick, whether we want to onboard a client as a new residence client or investment client or a client in a tax-free jurisdiction as a trust client, there's a lot of tick boxes or hoops that we need to jump through these days. And that is a way where governments around the world are working together, first of all, to make sure that there's less corruption, money laundering, terrorist funding. So that is all the right things that we as a global society needs to do. And on top of that, given the fact that we almost had 2 crises in less than 12 years, we had the financial crisis, governments had to step in, that cost them a lot of money. We had the recent pandemic, it's costing us money as we speak. All governments are looking for additional revenue. So even in the old days, you were thinking that, you can go and sit in a smaller country or a tax-free jurisdiction and governments will forget about you. I think that is all changing. So in the end, especially the US is driving a lot more in terms of compliance. We've mentioned source of wealth, source of funds, really understanding where the money is coming from. But then also making sure that, you pay tax somewhere in the world. You can't get away from that anymore. Even if you have a family structure, they will look through that and see who's behind the structure, the actual warm body. And in fact, these days, it's probably better to pay tax in a tax jurisdiction, so that at least that you can show that you are contributing to the tax web globally. If you think about, some of the countries these days talking about taxing tech companies like an Amazon or a Facebook, so it's not just in terms of where they're listed. That all indicates to us that we need to be wide awake that there is definitely going to be focus on this. But again, I think something like this provide the investor just an alternative option to say, well, if rules are changing, you're not forced to only be in one jurisdiction, and you can consider your options and pick the best tax jurisdiction that makes sense for you and your family.
Yeah. Micah, all that being said, as a nation, South Africans are, proud of their country. And so it can be a bit of a sensitive topic to discuss obtaining citizenship elsewhere. Why do you think South Africans need this?
Well, I think you firstly need to differentiate, between obtaining a second citizenship and actually looking at sort of one's cultural identity. And they're not one and the same. So, even if a South African takes a second citizenship, I think we've seen it around the world. When the Bokor are playing, everyone wears their green jerseys. It doesn't move away from that fact. And South Africans love their country. It's a magnificent country. It's a great place to live. The second citizenship, all it means is just an insurance policy should something go wrong. And it's not only applicable to South Africans, it's applicable to anyone, anywhere in the world. And what we've seen of recent, specifically because of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of citizens from developed countries actually looking at alternatives because they realize how important it is just to have that safety and security. You never know when things may change. So it's not specific to South Africans. It's really about making sure that all your eggs aren't in one basket and you have protected your family for the future.
Yeah. Les, through this conversation, you've underlined that this investment program is the oldest. It's the most trusted citizenship by investment program. You've talked about the platinum standard that has been garnered and, the kind of reputation it's built up. The question now is, how does a program like this maintain this kind of status? How do you make sure it's a sustainable one?
I think it's important for us in St. Kitts and Nevis to ensure the integrity of the program, to give our international partners confidence that we are not allowing people to get access to our citizenship who don't deserve it, that our due diligence is as strong as it can be, and we are continuously looking at ways to improve on the due diligence. So I think with that, we expect that our program will continue to shine. Our real estate market, our sustainable growth fund, our private home sales, our alternative investment options. These are all things that will allow the clients to appreciate the fact that St. Kitts and Nevis as a country is one of the most developing countries.
Where do South Africans tend to gravitate in terms of offshore investment, both in terms of region and type of investment?
If we talk not about citizen programs, but physical investments in terms of diversifying your wealth out of South Africa, then, given the fact that, like I've said, most families generate their wealth here, so living and working here, we've got quite a big exposure to emerging markets in any case. So most of the time, the first thing that clients would like to do is to say, well, let's get it into a hard currency. So we're talking dollar, sterling, euros, and also into developed markets. So get exposure to non-emerging market countries. We know that when things go tough, when it's risk off, so to speak, emerging markets, whether it's emerging Asia, Latin America, or Middle East, Africa, we all behave the same. And in fact, SA can actually be a leverage play on that because we're so liquid. So when things go well, we benefit more, and when things are tough, we probably get a bigger hiding. So yeah, I would say the first thing is a hard currency. The dollar is still pretty much the referred currency as we speak. There's a lot of debate about the remaining the reference currency in future, given all the debt. But the reality is, even if you look at central banks, 66% plus of their currency reserves are still in dollars. All trade globally are still settled in dollars. So I don't think there's a immediate risk that the dollar will disappear as the reference currency in the world. So dollar with diversification to sterling and euros, that's very popular. And then a global diversified portfolio, because it's all about diversification, which is the primary objective when families are starting to think about this.
At the end of the day, let's take a look, Micah, at the global mobility. This buys you, though, beyond just that, the Caribbean platform.
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the citizenship of St. Kitts and Nevis, you're obviously entitled to a passport. And with that passport, it gives you access to a number of business hubs around the world, including, London, Zurich, Singapore, Hong Kong. So it's a great tool for businessmen. I mean, I've seen a lot of my clients, their lives changed because they've been able to make it to that meeting in Zurich without having to stand in lines and obtain visas. Yes, I do know you can get long, extended visas for 2 years or whatever the case may be, but visas can be cancelled quite quickly, and the process is laborious. So we're seeing that the option of becoming a global citizen is so profound on people's business.
Yeah. Well, on that note, before we start wrapping this conversation up, are you a citizen of the world?
Are you a citizen of the world? Yes, we are. As parents, we are devoted to our families and provide the best for our children. Being citizens of the world means giving our family the chance to experience life at its fullest. To build bridges we didn't realize we needed. Bridges that last for generations. To have the opportunity to be free. To teach our children they can be anything they want. To set them on a path they will be great at and have the strength to let them go. To see them grow and fall in love. To become grandparents. To honor family traditions and create new ones. Because the best investments we ever make are in our family. CS Global Partners, transforming the lives of citizens of the world.
We're going to start wrapping things up with final comments from each of you now. Les, what does being a global citizen mean to you?
Well, I myself am a global citizen. I've lived around the world. I carry 2 or 3 passports, and it allows me that flexibility to take that vacation where I need to be, to go and do business in other parts of the world. I travel, through the Middle East, through China, through Russia, through Europe. So I'm a prime example of someone who has and can be considered a global citizen.
Okay, Micah, what are your final thoughts on the kind of shifts we're going to be seeing in investor mindsets about this concept, and how relevant it is in terms of the kind of security and the kind of insurance it buys you?
I think it's critical. I'm seeing that in the South African market, people are developing a more acute understanding of why something like a St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship is so key. I think because the Caribbean seems so far away for South African investors, it seems quite sort of an odd option. But when you think about it, it's an affordable, seamless process. You don't need to leave South Africa in order to apply. It's affordable and quick. It's trusted, even endorsed by the Financial Times. But more importantly, it's basically a priceless investment you're making on your family, because you can't put a price on the safety and security of your loved ones. So I think that's my closing for the day.
Well, thank you all for having joined us in this conversation. Of course, we've come to the end of the session, our panel sharing their knowledge and their perspective with our viewers. Thanks again to Les Khan, who's Chief Executive Officer of the St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship Investment Unit, Micah Emmett, who's CEO of CS Global Partners, and Martin Ackerman, Advisory Partner and Chief Economist at Citadel as well. And of course, thanks to you, the viewers, for having joined us. If you found this episode exciting or useful, please comment, share and subscribe to our channels. And if you have any questions, you can visit the official St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment website. That's www.ciu.gov.kn, or contact them directly at info@csglobalpartners.com. Do take note that the link of the recorded webinar and further information on the BDTV rebroadcast of the webinar will be included in the thank you mailer, which will be sent after the event, so do keep an eye out for that. And finally, a special thank you to CS Global Partners for their partnership in this broadcast. From me, Alicia Seckham, it's goodbye for now.